Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we have a very energetic episode for you today. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. My guest today is Gail Behrend. She is an engineer, speaker, healer, teacher, and energy practitioner. She is also the co-author of Energy is Real, a practical guide for managing personal energy in daily life. I'm just going to welcome Gail to the show and let her tell us her amazing story. So Gail, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
I've been looking forward to it ever since I found you. I did stalk you a little bit on the internet, and I found you. It's like, ooh, this is a lady I need to talk to. So, okay, so you're an engineer. An engineer is very practical and very scientific, hard science based, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I certainly was. I mean, there are all kinds of engineers, just like there are all kinds of people, but on average, our very job requires us to be scientifically minded, right? Because we're building things that could hurt people. I mean, we have to take an oath to put the interests of the public ahead of our own. We have to protect the public at all costs. Mm-hmm. And because we're building buildings, bridges, we're building, chemical plants, we're building things that can create a lot of harm and have done in the past. And so we have to take responsibility for that. And so that forces us to be really, sticklers for following the science, for making sure our calculations are correct, for adding factors of safety and all this stuff, because we know that no matter how good the science is, it's still just a theory. Mm-hmm. And so we have to add extra fudge factors in there, extra room for error, so that we're safe. So we'll over design something to ensure that it's as safe as it can possibly be.
So basically, it is very analytical, mm-hmm. and it is very fact-based. And as you say, you go into your projects with that bit of skepticism. What could possibly go wrong? So you're really looking at things, from so many different angles. So how did you go from being, as you called it, so I'm kind of quoting you, a skeptical engineer to a passionate speaker and energy healer?
Well, it's a long story, but for the first 30 years of from graduation to age 33, I was very much the engineer. And I believed in science with my whole heart, and I loved science and math and that sort of thing. And unbeknownst to me, I followed in my father's footsteps in the type of engineering I went into. I didn't even know what an engineer was as a kid. I just followed my interests. When I went to university, I ended up, I was really interested in physics and math. Still didn't know what engineering was. So I took my first year in pure science, pure physics and math, and just decided that I really wasn't interested in developing new formulae. I wanted to apply them for the benefit of humanity. So there was that practical side to me that really wanted expression. So in my second year, I switched into engineering. And I was one of 9 women in the entire university in engineering.
Oh,
yeah. And there were 2 of us who went into mechanical engineering. I was the second woman since 1946 to graduate from Queen's in mechanical engineering.
Oh my goodness.
The first woman since then was the year before me, but that was a huge gap because I graduated in 74. So she graduated in 73. That was a huge gap of, like what, 37 years or something between
Wow.
engineers, women engineers. So it was a big deal. And there are a lot more women engineers now, but when I went
Mhm.
through, there were a lot fewer.
Mhm.
And
So I would really like to ask you, what was it like? Because as a woman, I mean, being the only woman pretty much in a male dominated, company or, work environment, what was that like? And how was your relationship with the men?
well, it was interesting. The good news is I didn't have any sisters. I only had brothers. So I already knew how to relate to guys as equals.
Mhm.
And so basically it fell on my shoulders to initiate and keep the relationship comfortable. So by being a sister, basically, is how I behaved with my fellow students, and they were great. They really embraced that, and they would tease me and that sort of thing, but all not in a nasty way, just more in a fun way. And it made me feel kind of included. I didn't feel, treated like I was weird. Um, and there was another girl also in my class, so that the two of us hung out together as well. But we had to do labs and stuff with the guys, and so that went really well. And then I graduated, and then by getting into the real world, of course, there were far fewer women actually in the engineering profession at that point, because we were just like the vanguard of women starting to get into this. So I was the only woman engineer in the entire company.
Wow.
When I went started working, and a lot of people didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
They understood back in those days. They actually had secretaries. We don't. Nowadays, everyone started doing their own memos, but even memos, people were dictating memos. Even engineers to secretaries to deliver to somebody else in the office, so that sort of thing. So sometimes I remember my very first job, they didn't know what to do with me because it was a consulting company and they were used to having experienced engineers, and I was fresh out of school. And so they put me on a drafting table to draw. And in those days, everything wasn't computer based. It was, pen and ink and pen and pencil and those giant blueprint type drawings. And so I found, that wasn't really what I signed up for. Was drafting. But, and then they had, I think, what I ended up doing was the chief engineer came by and said he was planning a meeting with the engineers, and he came to me and he asked me to get coffees for everyone. and I was a real feminist, and I went and got them, but when I put them down in front of it, I said, "Don't consider making this a habit, Ernie." And after that, nobody ever asked me to do anything like that. The guys volunteered to get the coffee. So it's so funny. The other thing I did was I went to the engineer. There were a couple of engineers working at their desk. I was sitting at a drafting board, and I said, "Do you have any calculations I could do?" And their desk was overflowing with paper. And I said, "Well, yeah, I do actually." And so next thing I knew, I was moved to a desk, and now I was starting to do engineering work. So it was. At that young age, I was determined to succeed. I was proactive, and I wasn't waiting for somebody to finally fortune to smile on me. I went and I was pretty direct, right? And it seemed that in that all male environment, directness is appreciated.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah,
I bet they
a woman
really
would probably be upset, but the guys, no, that's how guys are with each other.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, you're meeting them at the level that they were.
Yeah.
And, not just pouting because they asked you to get the coffee, or, pouting because you were at the draft table.
Exactly.
Like, give me some real work to do here.
Exactly. And then I did it well. And they became, because I could demonstrate that I knew, I actually knew something. And the engineers, being the pragmatic types they are, they do respect performance. They respect your ability to do the job. And so I don't know, maybe my experience is different from other women, but I found that the equality, I earned it by being it. I wasn't asking for equality. I was being it. I was stepping into it. And I think that's a really big lesson for a lot of women, is they're wanting someone to give them equality, but it doesn't come from outside. It has to come. You have to find your own equality within and then live it. And that's what I ended up learning as I did it, right? That, and I'm glad that I grew up with brothers, because I already had that sense of I can hold my own in this. And so that served me in that environment. And I did have an experience a few years later. I was sent, I was still a young, I was like 2 years into my engineering profession. I ended up on a project that was building a brewery in Australia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my chief engineer my specialty was instrumentation and controls. So I did like control room stuff. And so I was assigned to develop the control panel and controls for the brew house, which is where the liquid that eventually gets fermented is first pressed from the hops and all of that stuff. And so it's cooked basically, and then it's sent over to tanks to be fermented and that sort of thing. So I designed the control panel, which had the graphic on it and all that stuff, and the push buttons. And then when it came time for them to build the plant, they were looking for people to go over and work on site to help with the design on site. And my chief engineer offered me, wanted to see if I would go. And of course I said yes, like, whoa, of course. But there was some resistance at the upper management, because they wanted to send another piping engineer, one of the guys. They didn't know me, whereas my team knew me. And then they said, she's the only one who can do this. Oh, so then they sent me. And while I was on site, the field, the manager of the project there, again, an older guy, didn't know what to make of me. And so we had like a party. It was a Canadian engineering company. So on Canada Day, we had a little party, and he was also Canadian. And so that we all gathered at his home, and he got drunk and came and asked me, to talk his daughter out of going into engineering. Like, what? And then he said, well, you're here as a token. I said, what? He said, yeah, because the major shareholder of the brewing company is a woman, a major investor, and that this was a political move. And I was really pissed off, right? So I went, after the party, I went home back to, the next day I was we were on a trailer where we were working. And I put a big sign on the back of my chair called "Token." My colleagues were all laughing because they knew I actually did have something to offer. Well, the very same guy approached my colleague, who was older than me, but not my boss. He was just senior in terms of experience, to come and train the future operators of the plant in how to use the brew house. And he said, well, I don't know anything about the brew house. That's Gail's department. You're going to have to ask her. And so he did call me and said, can you come and give a training to the operators on how to use this control room and all this stuff. And he wanted me to come for a whole week. I said, well, I can't go for a whole week, but I can come for a day. And so I went, and we were sitting in a big boardroom, like a really big room with a giant table and all these guys with hard hats sitting around it. And then blueprints on all the walls showing all the different process piping and stuff like that. And on those drawings are drawings of control valves and instruments like temperature measurements and flow measurements. Anyway, so we were reading through the operating procedure, which I helped write. And we got to a point where I was saying, valve such and such KV 1489 opens when you push this button. And I said, so it's on that far drawing, second pipe down on the left, right next to they said to me, you can see that from there? I said, no, I put it there. Well, they were so impressed, and all I was doing was my job, right? But because their expectations were so low, it was really easy to impress them, right? And so on the drive back, the project manager was raving how wonderful I was, and how if I ever wanted a reference, he'd be happy to supply it. And
so wait a minute.
I had totally turned him around.
So this is the same guy who had called you a token, and
to tell his daughter not to talk his daughter out of going into engineering. So it was so funny. And all I did was be me. and to be my, equal self and do my job. But so that was kind of an experience of discrimination, you could say, right? But I didn't have to fight it. I didn't have to, go up in arms and demand improvement, all that stuff. I just had to be me and to live, just be the engineer I am. And that spoke for itself ultimately.
And apparently you did it quite well.
I did, yes, according to him, and it actually got built. And about 9 years later, I was on holiday in Australia. I popped into the brewery and discovered that they'd upgraded it since then, and my carefully designed control panel was now the backup panel in another room. But still, it was gratifying to know it had actually served that long. So, yeah.
And, I think that's a beautiful message for my listeners and for all of us, is that you get so much more done when you just do your job, you be yourself, you show up, you be authentic, you don't have to pound the table or demand things, you don't have to be so sensitive that, oh my God, some guy asked me to get him coffee. I'm going to have to find my safe space and just go there, and, hug a teddy bear or something. It's like, okay, here's your coffee and don't ask me to do it again. Next time it's your turn.
Exactly. So you have to be able to, especially in that type of situation, maybe be a little what a normal woman would probably call rude, but I wasn't being horrible. I was just stating my boundary basically, and but in a way that left no room for doubt. So
the way I call that, and of course I learned this from martial arts for the most part, is standing your ground and finding your voice. That's all it takes. And it's easier said than done. I don't mean to make it sound really simple, but
that's true. And it's hard when you're frightened. I mean, it's another story if you're in danger, right? Yes. In this case, I wasn't. It was just my job. But it helped establish it early, because I learned just from experience doing that, people respect that. It actually elevates you. They don't see you as a troublemaker unless if you're complaining and wanting, somebody else to fix it, then they look at you as a troublemaker. If you just stand your ground and own who you are, what your capabilities are, and you do it, you demonstrate it, they get that. They see it. At least that was my experience.
But I think that's another important point, because a lot of people, especially women, and I will admit this because I'm really bad at this, we have a vein of insecurity that runs through us. And sometimes, that vein is deep and sometimes it's not, but we all have our insecurities, and it's really hard to find that place where we can present ourselves with confidence, which kind of segues very nicely into the work that you do as an energy practitioner. And I'm still loving this, the skeptical engineer turns, energy worker, because as we were talking, even before we started recording, I was one of those people who was, very like, okay, Western medical model, this is it this way, that way, blah, blah, blah. And all that other stuff was woo-woo until I found the woo and how much it helped me in my life. And then going into martial arts after that, with the energy and the intention. I mean, there's so much there. So tell us how you got interested in this energy journey, and take it from there. Go ahead.
Okay. So the one area, so I did well in my profession, staying in my head, my scientific, that served me and I enjoyed it. And so I did that for over 20 years. And then, but where I didn't do so well was in relationships. So that's where that left brain logical approach really doesn't work in man-woman relationships. That's their job, right? So it's taken as more competition than it is as, you don't want your lover to treat you like a sister, right? No. So you want to be fully a woman and that sort of thing. And so I was less confident in that part, in how to be perceived as a desirable woman, because I totally sort of taken refuge in my intellect in that sense. So I did well at it, but this is where, the big challenge for me was relationships. And so I ended up in a falling in love with a guy, and we were together for about 4 years. And it was an exciting relationship, but there was an element of danger in it because he was a bit of a gaslighter. And so over the 4 years, my own sense of worth slowly eroded as a result of constant criticism and judgments and that sort of thing. And we would have out and out arguments. At first, I held my own because I was good at that. But after a while, I got tired of the fight and ended up just sort of becoming quiet and letting, and then he would accuse me of being a zombie or whatever, because I wasn't engaging with the fight at that point. I was just tired of it. And I was mad at him because there was a lot of kind of insulting and critical comments going on, which eroded my self-esteem. And you hear that, you get angry, but I wasn't going to participate in a fight because I was tired of fighting. So in the end, that ended up affecting our relationship over time. And I wasn't allowing myself to express my anger because I did at first, but as the relationship wore on, I wore down. And I also knew it wasn't worth getting angry because then he would be angry for days. And I get angry quickly, it's over, I'm back to normal, not him. It was like he'd be angry for a whole week. And so it just wasn't worth it. Anyway, we got to a point, but I loved him. I was committed to, being with him. We were talking marriage. We were looking at houses together to buy and that sort of thing. And so in my mind, this was it. This is the man I was going to marry. And I saw my future, nicely plotted as my engineer mind would have done, right? The 2.5 kids, the English sheepdog, in those days, a station wagon, nowadays it'd be a minivan, and house in the suburbs, the whole 9 yards, right?
Light picket fence and everything.
Yeah, and of course I was going to be, I thought, well, if I did have kids, then kids was kind of expected, but I would probably go back to work in 2 years, and it was that kind of not really a deep commitment to the motherhood aspect, but if I had to, I would kind of thing. Anyway, what happened was his behavior towards me started shifting, and it seemed like more and more, he got more and more irritated by everything I did. It seemed like I couldn't even breathe right. And then he started saying, I want to go out and spend more time out with the guys. I want to go out with, just hang out with the guys for a bit. Well, that started getting later and later. And then one day, and he'd always been really good about calling about you being late for dinner or anything like that. But one night I didn't hear anything. And he didn't show up for dinner. He didn't show up, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I was starting to get concerned that maybe he was in an accident, called the police, no, called the hospitals, no. 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, he finally came in. I had gone to bed by then, but I was not sleeping.
Right.
And so I knew something was wrong and suspected that perhaps, and I'd even called a friend in my anxiety and said, I have a feeling our relationship may be in difficulty, may be in trouble. I guess I'd been in denial of what was going on the whole 4 years, but finally it was like coming home to me. And then he finally came in and I called out from the bedroom, I hope you've got a good excuse. And his response was, do you want me to sleep in the other room?
Oh.
And I thought, oh, shit. And I said, no, I think you better come in here and we need to talk. And we did. And it was like somebody took the cork out of the bottle and he just confessed everything. He was seeing this woman at work and all this stuff and how cute she was. And as if I was like his best friend, telling his best friend how great she was. It was the last thing I wanted to hear as his girlfriend. And it was breaking my heart. And to show you how much of a doormat I'd become, he went to sleep after unloading all this, I guess carrying guilt around is a big burden. He went to sleep after, and I went into the bathroom to cry quietly so I wouldn't wake him. Yeah, what's wrong with this picture? So it took me several days. So I had gotten so downtrodden in my own mind, my own self-esteem. It took me several days to realize I had a say in the matter. Mm-hmm. And one of the verbal weapons he had used in our arguments was, if I didn't like it or if I didn't do what he said, or he would leave and move in with his friend who was an Ironman triathlete who had given him room to stay in a spare room if he needed to, if we were into it. And I'd always begged him not to, right, in the past. But this time I finally realized, like, I can't, to myself, I can't stand this. This is not something I can live with. I just cannot. From deep within it, there's a huge no. I can't hang around waiting for him to decide what he wants to do. And it was my apartment. So I said to him, we were skiing when I finally broke the news to him on the chairlift. And I said, look,
oh my God,
I want you to, I mean, we're trying to retain normalcy, but it wasn't. And so I said to him, I want you to move in with your friend, Ironman, to Monday. And this was like on a Saturday. And the event had happened on like a Thursday. So it took days before I finally realized that I could actually choose for myself what I wanted. And I needed space, and it was my apartment. So
right.
he had to leave. Yeah.
I can't believe you told him on the chairlift.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it was the only time I could see him, because he was either at work or whatever. Right. So there we were. And the cat was out of the bag. I knew what was going on. And he seemed kind of smug about it, maybe think he could have the best of both worlds. I don't know, but it was like, this is intolerable to my essence, to my spirit. It just cannot, I can't continue in this way. And it was funny that he accused me of I can't believe you're being so hard. But by then, and so I went through a really strange experience that whole day, alternating between elation and freedom and, oh, thank God, and complete despair. What have I done? And we did end up separating, and actually we got along a lot better once we separated. But I was heartbroken, and I remember telling my colleagues at work, I didn't give them the details, but I said that I've had a big emotional shock, and don't be surprised if I make mistakes. So please double check my work. Oh. And they were kind, they were helpful. But after he left, I went through a period of spiraling into despair. I really, because to my engineer mind, that my future had just fallen off into an abyss, right? It was just, the earth had opened up and it had fallen off the edge. And what was I going to do now? And, would I ever find somebody to love me? And I didn't feel lovable at that point. I felt, like a loser, and all of the things we tell ourselves when we're down. And that I felt like, I would never attract love, and that I would be, kind of doomed to have a grief all my life. And I've talked to other women who've been in a similar situation, and I actually considered ending my life. At that point, it's like I went into this spiral and hit the bottom of the abyss.
Right.
And at that point, there was nothing left. I had just sobbed my heart out, and it literally felt like it was cracking open. And there was I was empty. There was nothing left in me except this deep despair and this desire to end it. And in that moment of feeling completely, all this self-loathing and completely unlovable, I had this sudden experience. This voice rang out in my head out of nowhere, because think of where I was last thing, and I was in this engineer, right? Last thing I would have expected was a voice in my head, and certainly one that was loving. And it said, and it was really a powerful energy experience as well. It said, "But I love you." Oh. And it was accompanied by a rush of energy down through the crown. This is pinky golden energy that just came pouring down with these words, "But I love you," touching every single cell. And it was like I felt in that moment that every atom of my being was known and seen and loved. Even the warts, even the parts that were ugly in my eyes were loved. And I got it as I was experiencing that this isn't unique to me. It was personal to me, but also that this love was all encompassing, and it encompassed others as well. Mm-hmm. And so I was getting this simultaneous experience of cosmic and vast and intimate at the same time. So it's like I felt it at a cellular level at the same time as my mind was expanding on a cosmic level. And I was getting this whole picture that this whatever this is, and I had no frame of reference for it. Because I wasn't an atheist, but I was an agnostic, because I felt atheism is a belief too. So agnostic is kind of safe. You just preface it with God, if he exists, with waiting for science to prove it, right? And but whatever it was, I had no frame of reference for in my left brain logical mind. And what really clinched it wasn't the words. If it were just words, I could have explained them away. It was the huge energy experience, this tangible experience at a cellular level, to feel hugged in your cells, in your every atom of your being, and to know without a doubt in that moment that you are deeply and dearly and unconditionally loved. Never felt that. I loved my parents, and I'm sure they loved me. They loved me too, but they were humans, right? And humans aren't always consistent in how they love. And so I'd never experienced that depth of love before in my life. And so when the feeling stayed with me for a few days, and it always comes back whenever I recall it. So even as I was describing it just now, I was feeling it. And so it's never left me in that sense. I just have to turn my attention towards it, and I can feel it again. But I had, as I said, no frame of reference for this. My engineer mind was blown away by this experience. And of course, I had to figure it out. What was that? So where do I go from here? Suddenly my perception of reality has been expanded, and there's more to this than I thought. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to explain it. So my first, coming from that place, it was trying to look it up and read it and that sort of thing. So the first thought that came to me was maybe to research near-death experiences, which seemed as, I'd heard about them. So maybe this is similar to what people experience in that. And even then, near-death experience, there are people who claim it's just chemistry, right? Brain chemistry. So I was reading those books, and then they led into other books. And then I started talking about it with people who are a bit more open. And they mentioned the Seth material, which is talking about the multidimensional nature of our reality and of us as beings. So little by little, my mind was starting to open. And when I read the Seth material, which is a channel, I would never read channeled material before in the past. Absolutely not. That's totally too weird. But because I had been blown open a little bit, I thought, okay, I'm going to suspend my judgment until I see what information comes from this. And so with a paperback, it took me a year to read it, because every paragraph boggled my mind. I would read a paragraph and I'd have to go, whoa, and put it down and really let it sort of sink in. And what was really strange was, as I read the book, was that the information felt weirdly familiar.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know why it felt. I'd never studied anything like this before in my life. And but it felt like, I know this. I don't know how I know it, but I do. I know it at some level. And it felt like there were like little, things happening in my brain, like tumblers clicking into place or whatever, to use an engineering expression. But there was like pathways that were finally clicking into place that weren't available to me before. And so I was by the time I finished the book a year later, I had no problem with the idea of channeling and channeled books and that sort of thing, that they could be a source of information. I also understood that they could be distorted, because it comes through a human, and depending on how clear that human is, the information can be distorted by their beliefs and that sort of thing. So you do have to be mindful of what you read. But the next phase, I was, to help me with the emotional healing, I was reading books by Wayne Dyer, and he's kind of a practical kind of guy, so that sort of spoke to me, and Louise Hay and that sort of thing. So I was getting a grounding in the metaphysical side of reality and how our thoughts do affect our reality. All of this at an intellectual level. So it took me about 10 years of intellectual exploration before it finally dawned on me, I have to live this. I have to actually deal with my own broken heart, which I had put on the back burner while I was doing this explanation. And so the more I learned, the more I realized that I was setting myself up for potential illness. if I
Uh,
didn't deal with it,
mhm,
because that at the core of most illness is some sort of wounding, emotional
mhm.
or psychological wounding, and that had definitely been huge wounding. But I didn't know, how do you heal emotions? I don't know, how do you heal emotions? And so I was living in Germany at the time and went into a new age bookstore, which happened to carry a decent selection of English books as well. And as I was kneeling down looking at a lower bookshelf of books, one of the clerks came by with a new shipment of books and started putting them right in front of me. And the title was The Healing of Emotions. So
Oh.
it was like, oh, I guess this one's for me.
There was another one of those strange moments that's very anti-engineering.
Absolutely. And well, it took me 10 years to get to the point where I would have noticed, right?
Right, exactly.
So it took a while to prepare this engineering mind for me to open to more things. And so I ended up calling them. It was by Chris Grescom was the author, and she was based in New Mexico, and she wasn't that famous in the US, but they really loved her in Europe. And she was made famous there by Shirley MacLaine's books. I think Out on a Limb and
Oh,
Dancing in the Light, where
yeah.
Shirley talked about going to a New Mexico healer who led her into past life work.
Mhm.
So she revisited some past lives through this work, and the work was extremely powerful for healing emotional wounding and stuff like that. And so when I finished reading the book, I thought, oh, I need to do this. So I contacted them, and they said, where are you calling from? And I said, Germany. I said, oh, well, we've got an institute in France. Why don't we book you in with a facilitator there? And so that was my next step in my journey. And so I went to, so I took some time off from work, vacation time, and went down to the south of France where this was being held in a tiny little village.
Oh,
And
that's a wonderful place to,
I
you know.
know, and I'd always longed to go to France. So here you go. Here you go. So I had a number of, I took about 8 days of sessions and went really deep. And it was also clearing stuff with my parents and all of this stuff, because a lot of our wounding originates with parents. But it was also other lifetimes. Sometimes trauma can pass on through if it's not resolved in that lifetime, it moves on through other lifetimes until we can finally get to it. So
Mhm.
this whole thing about feeling unworthy and unloved and unlovable and all of that stuff had deep roots, and so that was took quite a bit of work, but it was deeply freeing. And then I was staying in a French country inn there and got to know the owners of the French country inn. And the husband, he was actually acting as the coordinator of the Light Institute's activities in Europe,
Mhm.
sending out newsletters, things like that, and finding, chauffeuring the guests, the clients to their sessions and all that. So anyway, I got to know him and his wife, and I went back to Germany, went back to work. So that was all in December. In February, I got a call from him saying he and his wife were breaking up, and how would I feel about helping her run the hotel? Out of the blue, right? Like, I was in my 40s at that point and had come to the point of wanting to make a change. I loved my career, but I didn't like the lifestyle of being on the road all the time and
Uh-huh.
spending all my time in refineries and things like that. So and I just turned 40 that year, and so it was like, yes. So I went, quit my engineering job, and went to France and moved there, and then I helped her run the hotel, and so I took over his role as the coordinator for the Light Institute in France at the time.
I got to ask, did people think you were crazy at the time when you're leaving your
Oh,
job
in the engineering office.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't give them the details about the healing stuff. I did say that, I'd gotten this wonderful opportunity, and that part, they were pretty envious, I think, some of them.
Mhm. I'll bet.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think they probably did, because privately think I was crazy, but they didn't tell me that to my face. So I ended up staying there probably 9 or 10 months. and it was, as you can imagine, it wasn't the easiest environment to be in, because obviously his wife was hurting.
Right.
And she had 3 kids to look after, as well as run the hotel and all that. So there was a lot of stuff coming up emotionally. And so I was kind of there to provide a shoulder to cry on, as well as helping with the tasks of running the hotel, helping to get the food in. And she would host big groups of mostly therapists and their clients, giving like intensives and stuff like that. And there'd be like 40 people staying. And we fed, it was like all food and all that was included in their stay. So she was doing a lot of cooking, and we had to do a lot of grocery shopping, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
40 people. And so that was quite time consuming. And then as well as that, I was doing managing, chauffeuring clients to their sessions and stuff. But one of the benefits of that for me was that because I was working for the Light Institute, I got what they call family rate on sessions. So I could have as many, if there were facilitators who didn't have a client, I could volunteer and have sessions, and I would pay a much smaller amount. And so like paying about a quarter of what regular clients paid. And so I went for it. I just went nuts with getting sessions and going deeper. And so it's like I did the kind of had an intensive of my own going through all this stuff. And after a while, the director of the Institute in Europe came to me and said, and she'd given me a few of my sessions, and I said, I think you'd make a good facilitator. So I thought, whoa, really? And I loved the work, and that's sort of, I was really learning from it. And she said, yeah, I'm planning to offer classes in the coming year. Are you interested? And so the universe sent me an opportunity. I said yes. So after I moved back to Canada, I went and did her training, and then started offering those sessions in Canada. And then eventually, I went for advanced training with her like a couple of months later, and met a girl who was also doing the advanced training, an American woman. And while I was there in the training, I had a kind of a romantic interaction with one of the guys who was doing the training. It was a flirtation. There was nothing actually physically going on, but there was definitely, energy flowing between us. And then something happened, and suddenly he pulled away. And after that, I felt like I had a gaping hole, and I couldn't explain it. I felt like a giant hole in my solar plexus area. What's going on? I felt like I was leaking energy, and it was painful, extremely painful. And so this girl was studying at the Barbara Brennan School. And she said, well, you are leaking energy. And then she explained to me that what can happen in relationship is that we form subtle energy cords between ourselves and other people. It's how we communicate on a subtle level. It's totally normal. And but if a relationship gets disruptive and one person's angry with another, sometimes they'll rip their cords out of the other person, and that tears the field and can leave a hole. And our energy is then leaking, our life force is leaking out through that hole. And so she said, would you like me to fix that for you? Yes, please. So then she waved her hands over my solar plexus for a few minutes. Next thing I know, the pain was completely gone. And I said to her, I need to learn this. I need to learn so I had no idea that we could hurt each other in relationship. Energetically like that. Energy is such a vague thing. We don't realize it. Well, there's a lot more going on in relationship than we realize. And it's also how manipulation and abuse can happen. Even if there's no physical abuse, it can happen energetically. And so I ended up enrolling in the Barbara Brennan School, and it was a 4-year program. It's not like a weekend certificate thing. It was a 4-year intensive program. And we were learning also about psychology. We were learning about physiology, anatomy and physiology. We were learning about how to open our awareness and how to manage our own energy. And a really big part of it was understanding how human consciousness develops from infancy, and how the how our ability to perceive grows over time. So we make judgments as little 2-year-olds that are based on 2-year-old logic, not adult logic. And so often we will take the blame for things that aren't our fault. We'll think it was our fault our parents divorced. We're 2. What do we know? But that, at that level of ego that we're at that age, we think things are black and white, or, we have kind of an egotistical view. And so we think it's because the parent who leaves didn't love us anymore, or we were not good enough for them, or whatever. And so then and it's such an intolerable feeling, so painful to carry, that we cover it over. And we basically divert our energy away from wherever we hold that memory and that conclusion. So literally we are, in our conversation, if somebody tries to talk about something we don't want to discuss, we'll say, I'm not going to go there. Well, literally our energy won't go there, wherever we hold that traumatic experience or conclusion. So we're in fact blocking ourselves. Nobody's putting the block in there. We're doing it in it for a good reason at the time, right? It's to protect ourselves. We're too little to know what to do about it. We're overwhelmed. And so we say, I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm just going to bypass it. So we bypass our energy literally away from the area where we're holding it. And so in that case, say the heart. And 50 years down the road, we start getting heart problems.
Yeah.
It takes a long time for these blocks to cause a physical difficulty. It doesn't have to take 50 years, but nevertheless, decades. And we won't put 2 and 2 together and realize it's to do with that we've been carrying this burden of guilt for our parents' divorce, all our lives. And we won't, because it's gone unconscious, because we haven't been there with our conscious awareness for so long, it becomes unconscious. And it affects our sense of self. And physically, it affects our cells because they're not being nourished normal in a proper sense. They're being starved of energy. And so the cells don't divide as often. They become more susceptible to injury and illness, and even a physical injury, right? If you had 2 people in the same accident, one person might just have a bruise and the other would have a broken leg. And it could be because that leg was already weak, because it held a block which prevented the energy from flowing fully in the leg. And it's only because it was already weak that in that same accident, it took it harder. It took it as it ended up with a break. But in our conventional way of looking at things, it just stops at the injury and says, oh, well, it was just an accident. Right. And we don't realize that we can explore and say, okay, so, well, why that part of the body? And then we can we'll follow the energy back. Basically, in a session, you're actually bringing the consciousness to the area that we haven't gone to. So, but it's your adult consciousness. So you're able now to process what the 2-year-old couldn't process, because you've now grown up and you've got some life experience and you have a sense of compassion and understanding of how adults behave. And so now the part of you that got blocked off, which was still 2, gets a chance to grow up, and you realize, oh, what I thought was true wasn't. It was never true. It wasn't my fault. And there's this huge wave of self-forgiveness that happens. And that then, now there's nothing to defend. There's nothing to hide. So the energy begins to flow all by itself, just because we resolved that, which we couldn't resolve when we were 2.
So tell us how you work with clients to facilitate this healing process, to be able to unblock those energetic blocks. And, I love the words that you use, the, energy attacks. And that's something that, I learned in martial arts that, I would have poo-pooed before, but it's something that we actually, I don't want to say we play with it, because that sounds, disrespectful, or that we're doing something, but there is a way of being able to sense somebody else's energy, somebody else's intention towards you, to help keep yourself safe and protected.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a natural, this is the thing, it's natural. It's built into us. All animals have this ability to sense energy and intentions and that sort of thing. I mean, just watch your cat, as soon as you try, I don't know if you have a cat, I think you have dogs, but I had cats, right? And I had to keep my thoughts shielded if they got out and I was trying to round them up and bring them back, I had to keep my thoughts shielded. So I wasn't saying, I'm going to get you. I was thinking, oh, what a lovely kitty. Oh, I so love cuddling with you. And I was holding those thoughts and whole beaming love. And they would come right up to me, like, gotcha, but we have those same abilities. They're built into us as physical beings, right? So they're natural. They're not weird. They're not only for people who are highly psychic. They are a normal part of us. And what we, in our Western culture, at least, we've learned to ignore that information. We've been accused of imagining it. And in fact, abusers frequently say that. When a kid says something, they'll say, nah, you're just imagining that. It's not me.
Right.
Or and it's not true.
Even an adult woman, absolutely. I mean, I've had that experience, it's like, that's not possible. You're just making it up. Or
exactly.
Something happened, when you were a kid, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I want to ask you another thing, because I have strong feelings about this. And so I'd like to get your opinion, but absolutely. Even like you said, we all have this ability. We all have this ability to sense, and have this energetic, power and awareness. Do you believe, because in our society, we have so many things that are kind of numbing that and dumbing that part of us down with the devices, with the, 24/7 news cycle, with living in a world that is so almost somatosensory deficient, with all of, our devices and I'm trying to think of a word, mechanical.
Yeah.
Even, like the mechanical structure of how we live and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so it absolutely, and it's all designed to take you out of yourself, right? So it's the biggest problem is it's so distracting from where the truth is, which is inside. It's not out there, and we're being given this manufactured truth through social media. And it's the reason we're so confused is because it's chaotic. It's not actually, there's no agreement out there. Everybody's spouting their opinions, and their conspiracy theories or not, it's all still opinion. Even the experts are spouting opinions. And so, and they don't agree. So if we go out there for our information, we're going to come back not only confused, but overwhelmed, because there's just way too much information bombarding us from all our devices. And that our brain does, can you imagine, what our brains were used to dealing with before, like just in the last not even 50 years, it's less than 50 years, right, since we've had this onslaught of information. And people wonder why they're getting forgetful. Well, our brains are full. We have to actually put stuff out of there to make room for more, right? And so we're constantly cramming in more and more what is basically junk food for the mind into our brains. And the poor biological brain is saying, okay, in order for me to get on with my life, I've got to, get rid of some of this memory. Well, this old memory probably doesn't matter. I'll make room for the new, because this must be more appropriate, right? Whereas the thing you got rid of was something actually vital. So
it's really funny. My mother used to say that. I mean, my parents were both quite proficient at using the computer and stuff, much better than I was. And they both passed away 11 years ago, but I would marvel at their ability to, handle technology, because I was a technological moron back then. But my mother would just go, well, there goes another childhood memory I had to delete so I could bring, more information in. But it was so funny. And, and as you were talking and explaining all of this, those two words came back to me again, just, energy attacks. And it's almost like, the technology that we have is just so wonderful, because how else would I be able to have this incredible conversation with you and to meet you? And but on the other hand, we have to be really aware of it and be able to contain it and manage it. So absolutely, we're in charge of it and it's not in charge of us, because that is, to me, an energy attack.
It's a tool. We're letting it direct us. And in fact, and it's we have a choice in the matter. We don't have to, become zombies, staring at our screen all day.
Right.
And it's a tragedy that children are looking at their screens. I really feel that should be discouraged, because what are we pouring into their young, impressionable minds? I mean, it's bad enough, how they're dealing with life, but when you add a lot of the confusion of the internet in there, oh my God, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's hard for us. I mean, it's hard for adults, and it's hard to, you
And they're
know.
forming, like their minds are forming right
Yeah.
now. So this is going to be with them all their lives, whatever conclusions they draw. You know, that do you know, as a parent, do you want them drawing the conclusions that they're drawing
Right.
from, you know, and you see the bullying, you see all kinds of things going on to young kids, and it's wow, that's traumatizing
Mm-hmm.
for them. Even if they have the most loving parents, you know, there's stuff happening through social media that's traumatizing.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, it's we've allowed the tool to us to serve the tool ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
when in fact as and we are way bigger than just human. You know, there's so
Right.
much more to us, and we have the power to take charge of our own energy and decide where we're going to invest it, because it's an investment. Our energy is an investment. It's our life force.
Mm-hmm.
Is this how you want to invest your life force, in something stupid on Facebook or whatever? You know, yeah, it's
Exactly.
entertaining, but in the meantime, while you're being entertained, I know personally, I avoid Facebook, because when I get on it, I don't get off it for hours, right? Because
Yeah.
they're my friends. We're interested in the same things, right? So I'm following link after link. Meanwhile, 2 hours of my life has gone by, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it went. And you know, I'm in my 60s, so I watch my parents. You know, they lived nice long lives into their 90s, but nevertheless, my mortality's in my face now, right? So I'm now realizing, okay, I've got so many years left. I don't know how many, but you know, if I'm as lucky as my parents, it'll be, you know, at least 20, if not 30.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like nothing. And then I think, all right, do I want to spend the rest of my life doing stuff like this, or am I going to get going on why I'm here?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, to me, what nourishes me is, you know, aligning with the truth of my being, and there is a purpose. We all have one that we came in with, and so for me, I can't think of a better use of our time than exploring what that might be. Even if we don't know what our purpose is, it's worth exploring to find out what it is, because once you know, it'll speak to you and it'll make your life far more meaningful, and you'll make different decisions, because you want the purpose really speaks to a longing inside.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on purpose, it's nourishing your longing, and it's giving you energy. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you work long hours at it, you don't care, because you're being nourished as you're working. It's your joy to work at it.
So how can people get a hold of you? Where can they find you, and your book as well? You need to let us know where they can find your book. So
All right. Well, my book is called Energy is Real, a practical guide for managing personal energy in daily life.
mhm.
And you can find it on my website, which is energyisreal.com. And there's other information on the website. The book, you can buy it if you go to the books tab, you'll find it there. And also, you can find if you want to just sort of read a sample chapter, you can just sign up and download a PDF, which has the first chapter of the book in there. And that chapter includes some exercises, about
Nice.
6 exercises for how to sense energy. So you can start practicing to develop your energy awareness.
Mhm.
And so I think they'll find that fun. And there are other things on the website, including research links to various other websites that have some papers. If you're interested in the science behind it, there are now scientific studies that are exploring our energy nature. And so all of that's kind of, I hope they'll find that interesting. And I'm if they sign up, they can also get on a newsletter where I'll be sending energy tips and stuff like that. So, and you can reach me through the website. So you can go to the contact page, or there's even a phone number available on there if they wanted to speak to me directly. That's possible as well.
I love the fact that you included that, okay, you've got some tips in the PDF that they, so people can start practicing, because this is something that it can be a life skill.
Yes.
It's not something that, oh, somebody's got it and somebody doesn't. We all have it. We just have to learn how to nurture it and to grow it and to use it for the power of good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, ultimately, energy is such an important part of our personal power. And it's where we really connect with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we want to make sure our responses and reactions to life and to other people are coming from a place of truth. and not from a place of hurt and anger and judgment, because we're inflicting more pain when we're coming from that place. And so it's an acquired skill, but it's one that's so important. And the wonderful thing about the journey, when I talk to my clients, I use that analogy of when they come in with a physical complaint, I see their energy field as a treasure map. Mm-hmm. And so wherever they're holding that physical complaint is like a big red X on the treasure map, which says it's calling out, dig here for buried treasure. Mm-hmm. Because as I said before, when you actually explore that wound, it's a place where they shut off a part of themselves. Mm-hmm. That 2-year-old, stop connecting with that part of itself because of that pain that was held there. When we go back into that area and clear that pain away and bring in your current adult consciousness, suddenly there's those parts of the 2-year-old that you had shut off, maybe creativity, maybe, it's come in with all kinds of gifts, become available to you. So it's not just, healing a sickness or a wound, it's opening to more of yourself. And that is a journey of a lifetime. And it's the most important journey of a lifetime. As you go into that, you claim every little piece of power that is you becomes available to you.
I usually ask my guests at this point if they have one more little final pearl of wisdom to share with us, but I think that was it. I mean, that was pretty powerful.
Yes. Well, that is basically the message. The title of the book says it all. It's real. Energy is real. Now let's use it, because it is, in my opinion, the answer to abuse and to manipulation is to see it and to know it for yourself without somebody telling you it is or isn't. You can sense it. And then you can choose, once you know how to manage your energy, you can choose to change your response so that somebody isn't actually getting any juice from you, because that's why they do it. And not everybody does it consciously. That's the other thing. People they've just learned ways of being around others as a form of, I don't like the term energy vampires, because they're often not conscious that they're doing it, but they've, through their own life experiences, learned to gain energy from others.
Right.
And because that makes them feel better, but they don't know how they're doing it. It's just a certain combination of behaviors that they've learned that somehow juice them up. And so then they go out, it doesn't stay with them because they aren't healed. And so it dissipates, and then they have to get more. So once I'm all for people learning how to own their energy so that they can own their life and not be subject to manipulation and upset, and not insisting that other people change so that they can feel happier in their own life.
Well, again, like you said, it's just incredible empowerment.
Yes.
Having that ability. I also love the way you said, other people get juiced up from, and it's like, yeah, because it's almost like that electrical charge or something that they're getting.
Exactly.
So. Well, Gail, I cannot thank you enough for being here. This has been a fascinating conversation. I have just really loved talking to you, and I am going to be signing up for your newsletter, because I just can't wait to learn a few more tips and tricks, because I already have a few in my bag.
I'm sure you have plenty.
Well, yeah, I have a few, and I would like to kind of ramp them up a little bit, or give them like a little B vitamin shot or whatever.
Oh, awesome. Well, I would love to learn more about them. So that sounds really great.
I'm willing to share. So once again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening. We both really appreciate you tuning in, and do check out Gail's website. Contact her. This is just fascinating information, can change your life forever and have you live that vibrant, healthy, fulfilled life that we all actually really deserve. So that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.